Top 13 horror films of the last decade. You're Next, an effectively jumpy horror film. You're Next takes the home invasion genre to the next level. It successfully uses the right amount of gore and focuses on the small details that will stick with you well after the film has ended. The Cabin in the Woods. In 2012, audiences were introduced to The Cabin in the Woods, a multi-layered horror masterpiece. The Host. Bong Joon-Ho's critically acclaimed 2006 masterpiece brings the monsters back to the horror movie genre. Splice. After two young scientists are told by their employer to halt their groundbreaking research splicing together multiple organisms' DNA, they cross a line that they can't come back from. The Orphanage. The Orphanage, directed by Juan Antonio Bayona, is a horror film you don't want to miss. The Descent. This 2005 horror film, directed by Neil Marshall, is a claustrophobic's worst nightmare. Let the Right One In. Not to be confused with the 2010 American film Let Me In, the 2008 film Let the Right One In is already considered a horror classic. Antichrist. Not since The Shining has a horror movie captured the quick decline of a marriage into hell. 28 weeks later. Following a successful 28 days later, director Juan Carlos Fresnadillo brings audiences an even darker and more intense horror film. 28 weeks later takes on the original, upping the ante and creating a pitch-black vision that's powerful. The Mist. Frank Darabont's horror film The Mist is a true horror film. With some of the expected horror film tropes, this film builds until the end when it hits the audience right in the gut. Wolf Creek. Director Greg McLean sets up a foreboding landscape that takes the terror full throttle with its visceral quality. Evil Dead. This 2013 remake of the 1981 cult classic Evil Dead is just as good as the original. While it doesn't have the same humor as the original film, the bloody final confrontation definitely rivals the original. In Fear. The scariest British horror film of 2013, In Fear captured the real terror that comes from being lost in the backroads of Ireland. The Eye. A blind girl gets more than she bargained for when she receives an experimental eye transplant. Do yourself a favor and rent the 2002 original. The remake with Jessica Alba doesn't hold a candle. Ju-on. One of the first Japanese horror classics to get remade by a Western studio, Ju-on is a ghost story and a chilling one at that. Paranormal Activity. Arguably one of the most successful found footage movies ever made, Paranormal Activity tells the story of a haunted house and a young couple's attempts to film the hauntings.